Daniel Sports Central, we go over our 2022 college football predictions for the LSU Tigers, team that went 6-7 overall in the 2021 season. But all this team being 2022 and whether or not LSU will once again be an SEC contender in the 2022 season is what we go over here today. We'll be analyzing this team and predicting their schedule game by game in this video. Starting out with their team trends. LSU 6-7 last season. They were 3-3 in their first 6 games, 3-4 in their last 7. And this was a team last season that, they had higher expectations than they did going into 2020. It was acceptable for this team to have a down season in 2020, considering how outstanding of a team this was in 2019 and the amount of talent that this team lost after that 2019 season, which, if you think about it, literally 2 years ago, this team was 15-0. They won the national title in 2019, and I will say 2019 LSU is one of the best football teams that I've ever seen, potentially the best in the past couple of decades for sure. It's widely considered that way. LSU's 2019 football team was nothing short of just outstanding, but obviously 2020 down season. 2021 wasn't much better. 6-7 was the overall record last year, and this team is still trying to find their footing after losing a lot of talent after the 2019 season. So Ed Orgeron's out, and now it's Brian Kelly coming in from Notre Dame, obviously, which was a very significant move for Brian Kelly coming from Notre Dame, which he was an outstanding coach at Notre Dame, had a lot of success there, so there's no doubt in my mind he's going to have plenty of success with LSU in the future. Just a matter of when at this point. But for LSU here, this is a team that's obviously in a rebuild mode right now. I'm just going to put it out there. This team is not going to be in the college football playoff next season. But I do want to say, LSU, this team is on the right track with a really good head coach. And within a couple of years, this team could be competing for SEC championships, maybe even national championships once again. But looking back at 2021 here, this team lost to UCLA in week 1, which was obviously just a tough loss, 27-38. Very disappointing loss to start off the season there, even though UCLA is a decent football team. Beat Mississippi State to finish out September there, 28-25. Beat Florida 49-42. Lost to Alabama by 6, 14-20. Kept that game close. Beat Texas A&M, which was a huge win, 27-24. So this team, they showed potential. They had some good wins last season, and they got to a bowl game and completely just a terrible game against Kansas State. Lost that game 20-42. So, once again, this team was incredibly inconsistent last season. They had a few really good games, but at the same time, definitely a few ugly performances. But looking forward to 2022 now, let's look at your roster preview going into next season. Max Johnson has transferred out, the starting quarterback for this team last season, which, he's a very polarizing quarterback. His stats were pretty good last season, but he certainly was an inconsistent quarterback at times. Not the most consistent quarterback around, but, his stats weren't bad. 2,800 yards, 27 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, pretty good touchdown-interception ratio, and a 60% completion rate. But the thing is, though, he's not a dual-threat quarterback, so, that puts a lot of weight on his passing stats, and his passing stats were okay, nothing outstanding, but obviously, considering he's just a passing quarterback, that does make a difference there. But Miles Brennan's coming back, and you also bring in Jayden Daniels from Arizona State, which if you have been around this channel for a while, you guys do know that I have liked Jayden Daniels since he's gotten into college football. If you remember Jayden Daniels, he's a quarterback that back in 2019 he was nothing short of outstanding. Showed some tremendous potential. True freshman season, threw 3,000 yards, 17 touchdowns, 2 picks. That is incredible. He only threw 2 picks in a football season as a starting quarterback, and he had a 61% completion rate. So, considering that was his true freshman season, he showed tremendous potential going into 2020, which turns out 2020 was a disappointment, and 2021 wasn't much better. If you look at his 2021 stats, 2,300 yards, 10 touchdowns, 10 picks, and a 65% completion rate. So despite his completion rate being higher, threw a lot more picks in 2021. So, Jayden Daniels, he has progressively gotten worse over the course of his career, it looks to be right now, but who knows? Getting a new start for Jayden Daniels could be a really good thing. But Miles Brennan, of course, is also in there, which we've seen a little bit of him, not too much. In 2020 he played a little bit, threw for 1,100 yards, 11 touchdowns, 3 picks. So once again, we haven't seen too much out of him, but Miles Brennan has been around for a little while with LSU now, so we'll see how he's able to play for this team. But certainly it's a very interesting quarterback situation there with Daniels and Brennan. You lose your top running back from last season in Tyrion Davis-Price. Last season he put up over 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns, so that's a significant loss. Receiving core looks pretty good. Kayshawn Butte's coming back. Jure Jenkins is coming back. Jack Beck also coming back. So you got your top 3 wideouts coming back for next season. All 3 of them were impact players for sure last year. So receiving core looks good. The backfield, I could consider to be a question mark going into next season, considering, I mean, obviously losing your top running back there in Davis Price, but also your second running back from last season, Corey Kiner. He is also gone. He's in the transfer portal, or he left in the transfer portal. So the backfield is definitely a question mark. The quarterback situation is uncertain. The receiving core looks pretty good. The offensive line I'm also concerned about. You lose 4 on there. You lose 3 defensive linemen, 1 linebacker, 3 in the secondary. So defensively, you lose 7 of your starters from last season. So there's a few question marks for this team next season, that's for sure. But I mean, this team is once again in a full rebuild mode right now, and it's going to take a couple of years for this team to get back to where they were. And I'm sure this team is going to get back to where they once were. It's just a matter of when, especially with Brian Kelly coming in. But brings up the question, will this team be a contender once again in 2022? I don't know if this team will be a very significant contender, but they're going to get some wins, and they're going to upset a couple of good teams next season. I can tell you that for sure. But transfer portal and recruiting now going to next season. Joseph Evans, defensive lineman, is off to UTSA. Once again, we mentioned Corey Kiner, running back, who's off to Cincinnati. Bring in Jarek Bernard, defensive back from Oklahoma State. You also got McKinney Wingo, defensive lineman, coming in from Missouri, as well as Greg Brooks Jr. coming in from Arkansas, and Joe Faucha, safety, coming in also from Arkansas. You lose Dwight McCluthern, defensive back, to Arkansas, and Trey Palmer, who was a top 5 receiver on this team, I think, from last season. He's off to Nebraska. Recruiting wise, not bad. 12th in the nation. You got, or you're 4th in the SEC. So recruiting's pretty good for LSU going into next season, despite you losing a couple players in the transfer portal. You got 1 5-star coming in, and then 6 4-stars. So not too concerned about the recruiting there. And once again, it's just a sign for the future. This is going to be a team that's going to be good. They're going to be great once again sometime in the future. I just don't know if it's going to be 2022 quite yet, considering this team is still in a rebuild mode, it's safe to say. But looking at your schedule now, you got Florida State in week 1 in a neutral location. Interesting matchup there. Florida State, of course, has been down for a long time. See if they can have a good season. Then you got Southern at home after that. Mississippi State and the New Mexico to finish out your September. In October, you got Auburn on the road, Tennessee at home, Florida on the road, and then Ole Miss. And then in November, you got Alabama at home, Arkansas on the road, UAB, and then Texas A&M on the road to finish out the season. So look at September here. Florida State, I'm going to say it's a close win. I do think it's a closer one, but in the end, I am confident that LSU wins that game. I certainly think this team is, I mean, they're in good hands with Brian Kelly, and I do think, even though this team isn't going to be, I mean, they'll be a good team next season for sure. I just don't see them being a major contender. I mean, they're going to still pull off some great wins next season for sure, and I think Florida State, that'd be a good win there. Beat Southern by a few touchdowns. You beat Mississippi State as well in a close game. Mississippi State could be a good team next season. I could see them in the 7-8 win range for sure. And then you got New Mexico, easy win there. So you start the season 4-0, really off to a good start. I would say if you can start the season 4-0, which is definitely possible. This is a team that, yeah, I think 4-0 in September is definitely very reasonable. But looking at October here, tougher month. You got Auburn on the road, which Auburn next season, I don't expect them to be terribly good. I think they're going to be kind of in somewhat of a similar situation to LSU. They'll be good in the future, but I just don't know if 2022 is going to be their year. But going on the road there, I do think Auburn pulls that one out in a close one, even though it's certainly winnable by LSU. Then you got Tennessee coming to town. Tennessee could be good. I could see them at 8 or 9 wins next season. You beat them in a close one. Got Florida on the road, also another tough one. I think going on the road there, I will favor Florida, but certainly another winnable game. Florida next season, I could see. I think they're going to disappoint a little bit once again next season. I don't really expect them to be terribly good, but you could see 7-8 wins out of Florida. And then Ole Miss at home, the Rebels next season. I don't think they're going to be quite as good in 2022. But they're still going to be a good team. Ole Miss is going to be a team I could see 8 to 10 wins next season, even though they won't be in a New Year's Six bowl game. But I do think you beat them. So you get a couple of good wins in October, yet a couple of tough losses. So you're 6-2 heading into a brutal month of November, except for that UAB game. I do think Alabama, you put up a fight against Alabama like you usually do, but you take a loss there in a close one. Arkansas on the road, that's another tough game. But Arkansas next season, I could see once again in that 8 to 10 win range. Maybe even, I'd say 9 to 10, honestly. I could see Arkansas definitely being a contender once again, which is crazy because, I mean, they just a few years ago were a bottom feeder in the SEC, but suddenly Arkansas is looking like one of the best. Then you got UAB, easy win there. You beat them by a couple of touchdowns, and Texas A&M on the road, going on the road in College Station against a really good football team, Texas A&M. You take a loss there as well. So you're 7-5 next season. I think 7-5 is be happy with a 7-win season in 2022, considering this team is still in a rebuilding phase. You're in great hands with Brian Kelly. You can say that easily. Brian Kelly is going to bring you back to a successful. This program is going to be successful once again in a matter of a couple of years. It's just a matter of rebuilding this team and building the talent back up. The recruiting is awesome going into 2022, and that's going to help you a ton going into the future, adding some great depth. And this team will once again be competing for SEC championships. I'm very confident in saying that in a couple of years. I just don't think 2022 is going to be quite the year, but this team will progress and get up to 7 or 8 wins next season. But let me know your thoughts and comments below on LSU, and I appreciate you guys watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.